It's Ken Rohla at FreshAndAlive.com coming at you from the beautiful metropolis of New Smyrna Beach, Florida. And today I have a great privilege of interviewing a longtime friend of mine and founder of Astrology.com and the beautiful host of STARSOUND Speaks.
STARSOUND Speaks.
STARSOUND Speaks podcast, which you can access on iTunes and at StarSoundAstrology.com. And today we're going to talk about medical astrology and the foundations of it a little bit, and maybe even get a little bit of a reading for this time of year.
Yeah, the 2019 forecast. We got a big year ahead of us.
Okay, so first, before we get into the wherewithals of astrology, I want to know what's been happening for the last 6 weeks, because it has been intense. And normally, a lot of what we have to deal with has to do with our reaction to things, or how we don't react to things. And generally my life goes along pretty smoothly. I don't usually react to things the way a lot of people might. But man, the last 6 weeks have just been hitting my buttons, and everything has not been working. Like the little things, millions of little things. This is like, if something can fail, it's been failing, and major stuff too.
You just nailed it when you said hitting my buttons or pushing my buttons, and that's basically what astrology does. It's astrology is the study of the stars in our solar system, and what we what's fascinating is that I'm kind of backing this up, but everybody has a birth chart. Everyone's born at a certain time and place, and at a certain moment in time, and they come onto the earth plane, and in that moment, it's like when they're born, it's like a snapshot is taken. It's like that exact moment. It's a freeze frame of all the planets in the sky, and they're all at different angles to one another. Some are challenging, just like people, just like relatives. You got some of us, we get along really well, and other ones need a little help to work out relationships. And that's so too with astrology. So when you were saying about the hitting, pushing a button, because what happens is we have that map, and that map of the heavens in the moment we're born is kind of like, you could say it's your roadmap to self-realization. That's how I like to phrase it when I talk to clients. And this is where we evolve, where we grow, where we realize ourselves, and the challenges and the journey we take, and the challenges that we are here to overcome and to have breakthroughs in. And so the moment that birth chart, it's called your natal chart, that never changes. However, of course, just like every day we have the weather, the sun rises and sets, the moon rises and sets, and everything's always moving. So there's planets. The planets move through our chart. They're called transiting planets. And when they move and literally hit your buttons, those are almost, you could say that planetary map is like acupressure points. And when planets touch that point, little cogs in a wheel, one gear over another, when that happens, that's when events happen. So depending on what that planet is and where it is in your chart, then it kind of gives you an idea of the kind of energies you'll be dealing with. Now, knowing that there's always free will, and some things can be very challenging. When Mercury is retrograde, things can fail. Venus was retrograde in 2018, and that only happens every about year and a half. But when it hits a sensitive point in your chart, that's when you feel it more. If it doesn't, then you kind of can sail through things, but it might hit more than one point. So that's the answer.
Well, I've always, ever since I've kind of looked at astrology, years ago, probably 25 years ago, when I first started looking at astrology, I got introduced to it actually by a guy who was, he worked with me, and he was an astrologer, and he was really good. And he would just mention off the cuff, so-and-so is going on with the stars, and so watch at work, you'll see this and this and this happening. And man, he nailed it every time. I was like, how does this guy know this stuff. Prior to that, my experience with astrology was just, the little blurb in the newspaper, which is, of course, a joke.
Everybody's introduction, right. It is a joke.
Yeah. I mean, there's no way that you could summate or summarize, the whole cosmos in 2-3 sentences. But at any rate, this guy was like uncanny with his, predictions. He would say, so-and-so is going to happen, and I would see it manifesting at work.
Yeah.
And so there was a period of a few years where when I really started looking at it.
This isn't so kooky.
Well, not just that, but I started, like a lot of people do, I started using it to justify taking action or not taking action. And what I realized, it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy, where you, based on the astrological arrangements, I may decide to do or not to do something that may not necessarily be a good way of approaching it, And so going beyond that, what I realized is the way I look at the astrological influences, or the astronomical influences, if you want to look at it that way, is that it's like the weather. Nothing trumps a good old-fashioned intention. And I've been in weather conditions where there's 4 feet of snow outside and it's coming down and everybody's staying at home, and I got to go do something. I've got to go drive somewhere when there's no snow plows haven't been out,
right.
and I had to do it, and I did it, and it wasn't easy. But I got it done. And so I look at astrology the same way. It's like, I know a lot of people who will use astrology to just not do anything, or to self-sabotage. They say, oh, Mercury's in retrograde, therefore I'm just going to do nothing.
Yeah, it's not a good, no. You're not using it powerfully.
Exactly. Yeah. So I kind of look at it like, I look at what's going on. And I'm by no means an astrologer. I usually either go online and see what's happening, or I talk to people like you and see what's going on. I don't use it as an excuse to act or not to act or whatever. It's just kind of in the back of my mind, like the weather report, going, okay, it helps to set your expectations when you are, living your life. And so that's kind of one of the points I kind of want to make before we get into some of what you're going to get into, is that, don't use astrology or anything as an excuse for doing or not doing, or altering your life in a way that doesn't benefit you.
But you can use it. A lot of what I do is I use it to motivate myself. I'm looking for opportunity. It will give you windows of opportunity, and you're like, hey, there are many times when I've just wanted to be lazy and slough off, and then I find there's this really cool window. I'm like, wow, I could let that go, or I could jump on it. Right. So I like to empower myself, and that's really what I
right.
And I encourage people when I teach my classes and see clients, is like, hey, use this to empower yourself. And the weather report analogy is very cool, because that's what I use too. I tell people, look, it's like, you always have free will. You can choose anything you want. We're dispelling these old, misunderstandings gleaned from, centuries of ignorance, where people think it's this fatalistic thing, and this is the way it is, and nothing can change. And, of course, that's baloney. But if you think of it like going to the beach, so you had your snowstorm experience, but I like to use the analogy of the beach. You can always go to the beach, but ideally, the best time to go to the beach is when the sun is shining. If you have free will. If it is raining, you could still go to the beach. Your experience is not going to be as ideal.
Right.
The sun is not there. The wind is blowing. You'll get sand in your sandwich. So it's not going to be the most perfect thing. Yeah. But you always have free will. You'll just have a different experience. And in some cases, it's dangerous, because there's a hurricane and there's right. Humongous swell. So you would be in danger. It wouldn't be just unpleasant, it would be just downright dangerous.
Right.
So there's just levels of that. So, I like to, to put it in that framework, and then you kind of start to see how that's how it really works.
And I've learned myself personally in my business especially, it's extremely useful for scheduling events, because I have scheduled events in the past when I didn't consider what was going on astrologically, and had horrifically difficult events in a few cases. And had I scheduled them at other times when it would have been more fluent, it would have been much easier. And I've seen that now. And so that is one area where I do pay a lot of attention to. If I've got any major event or any big thing, any big project, plan for the future, I talk to people like you and find out when are the most conducive times to do it, because it's so much easier. It's not that I couldn't get it done. I did. I've done a few events that I got them done.
Was it fun?
Oh, it was horrible. It was exhausting, and just
So it's like the tides. You can get your boat, leave the harbor when the tide's coming in, but you're going to have to gun the engine, and you're going to have to use more oomph to get over it. But it can be done. It's just, but hey, why not go with the rhythms, and why not just flow when the tide's going out, and you'll have that in your favor. The wind is in your favor. The tides are in your favor. So it's really just like that. A sailor will always check tides and charts when he sails, because nobody's going to say, well, that's hocus pocus. It's like, no, dude, there's a reality to this. We know the moon has an effect on tides, for example, and so astrology has been always, for thousands of years, people have used the stars to navigate. And what we also know is that we can use the archetypes that are associated with each one that represent certain facets of our consciousness. And so when we see there's challenging aspects to these things, then we can use that to move ahead or not, and like you said, navigate. When you said that about planning events, I immediately thought of, remember, what's her name? The Kardashian, Kim Kardashian, the oldest one, Kim. She married that basketball player years ago, the Chris Humphries. Well, when they announced that big hoopla marriage, it was during Mercury retrograde, and I thought, oh my God, this marriage is never going to last. Well, hello, 6 weeks, the ring was off.
Really?
Yeah. Wow. So I'm like, I don't know if she, who knows if they knew the astrology. Maybe some people accused her of doing it for publicity. Who knows? It doesn't really matter. All I know is that it was 6 weeks, and that was a fast marriage.
And that's about how long Mercury retrograde lasts usually, isn't it?
It's a 3 week, about 3 weeks transit, but there's a shadow period before and after. So, but when it took place, so, it's the kind of thing like, not a good idea. Now, some people can get married during Mercury retrograde, and it's not that there's a hard and fast of anything, like we don't want to be dogmatic about this, but there are certain rules that are certainly valid, we could say. One of them being if you got remarried, some people break up and get remarried, or they do things over, and so that's another aspect of it. So it's not about being rigid, but it's good to know these things, because it blew my mind when I like you, Ken, I grew up, like everyone else, you had the little newspaper horoscope, and then I'd sit there and read it with my mother and go, wow, isn't this is fun, maybe this is what's going to happen today, or it was just entertainment. But what nobody knew until now with the masses is that this is really this is nothing like that in the newspaper horoscope, and it is it's really it's a rich, deep body of knowledge that goes back thousands of years. And so it's really great to know, when you know the history, or at least some of it, then you get to see there's a very deep appreciation for all of these things. But I know when I first, I was living in New York when I first was, beyond the childhood, horoscope column thing, it was like, okay, fade to black. I knew all of a sudden, and now I'm an adult and I'm working in Manhattan, and there is this fabulous man that I meet, and he's this cool guy. I'm one of my colleagues at work, and we just struck up a little chat, and we thought, hey, let's meet for lunch. So we meet for lunch, and I remember I invited him over to my house. We had lunch in the garden. I can still remember this. And I was on Wall Street at the time, and so he had this really important job in financial, securities, this, that, and the other. I can't even explain it. All I know is you're super smart. I couldn't even figure it out. And that's all I knew about him, and he didn't know anything about me except my name. I didn't share any personal information with him. And he asked me how old I was, and I said, oh, I just turned 30. And he said, oh, 30? You've just been through your Saturn return. And I thought, what is he talking about? Saturn return? I'm like, did Saturn leave?
This is a finance guy who works on Wall Street.
Yeah, this is like a really sharp dude. And I'm like, oh my God, like, what is this guy talking about? And he goes, wow, yeah, you've been through your Saturn return. return. I'm like, well, where did Saturn go? I didn't know he left. Okay. And but then I think the only thing that saved me from like running away was that, well, this man is super smart on Wall Street. It was like those credentials, like, kept me listening. And I said, okay, and then he proceeds to tell me in this unbelievable detail how the nature of what had just happened to me for the last 2.5 years. And he proceeds to say this, and I'm going, oh my God, this is crazy. Like, he basically described my life for the last 2.5 years, which was the toughest 2.5 years of my whole life. How did he know that? How did he know that? He just nailed it. So that, moment of truth. There's, there's something here. I don't know what it is, but that's interesting. This is not the newspaper horoscope. So, fade to black years later. I didn't pursue anything in that particular moment, but it was definitely a seed planted. And then from, years later, I got into it, and 3 different people who were all brilliant astrologers all mentored me, and between them and self-taught, I delved in and got into the whole, the thing. And but as I was doing that, I was in, I had been doing sound healing energy medicine, sound healing, yes. Crystal bowl sound healing. And
yes, I've had that. The little aside, I did a workshop that Irlianna hosted, a sound healing workshop, and I had not had experience with that before. I knew sound was powerful conceptually, but I had never had an experience like this. My assistant and I both went to her workshop, and after the first day, we were wiped out.
You were like hanging over the sofa.
Not only were we wiped out, like just totally exhausted. I mean, this is like 6 o'clock in the evening. We went home and went to bed for like 12 hours. But we also had massive cleanse reactions, both of it. It detoxed the heck out of us. Just sitting listening to you doing the crystal bowls.
Yeah,
I mean, like massively detoxed us.
And what's interesting is, like, to me, who you are with Fresh and Alive is like, oh my God, like, it's Ken Rohla. He doesn't have toxins. He doesn't have there is no toxin that can reside in your body. So it's like, when you told me that, I was like, woo, moment of truth.
Yeah.
So sound, frequency, yeah. So frequency alters reality, you could say. Interestingly enough, when I saw that it was time for me to do this full out, so I had been doing sound healing energy medicine, and then I felt that part of it was complete for me, the expression of it, the workshops, the intensives, great healings, outrageous stories that could fill a book like yours and many others, and that was all super awesome. But there was something in my heart that said, okay, there's something else coming, and I don't know what it is. And it ended up, in hindsight, it was astrology. I just needed years to study it and to get fluent in it. I didn't know I was going to be an astrologer. It's just crazy the way life happens, but it just revealed itself to me that this is what I should do, moving forward. So is there a segue between the two? Yes, it turns out. Not that I knew, but I remember I asked the universe, all right, I need the name of my practice. I need to name it. I don't know what to name it. I don't want to sound too like 3D and boring and whatever. And I don't want to be like so out there that it's like, I got to find some happy medium that's going to really connect with the people I'm supposed to serve. So I just said, okay, I'm just asking, all right, putting it out there, and put it out. About maybe 4, 5, 6 weeks passes, and I have this dream, and in the quote dream, I'm standing in the void. It's like this, like standing in the void, like this black, it wasn't even a room, it was just this like isness, I don't know how to explain it. And in huge white glowing letters, it said www.starsoundastrology.com. And I went, oh, and then I turned to a friend who was in the next room, and I said, hey, I got the name of my website. And then boom, I woke up. And I thought, whoa, that's crazy. Of course, I go run to the Who Is domain registry, and nobody had taken it. But before I woke up, it was only a few seconds long, that dream. But in that folded time, I got this I don't know how to say it, an understanding that, and I can't even really say it in English, so this is the best I can come up with in this moment, was as I saw those words, simultaneously the understanding that all sound is vibration and frequency, like I knew because of all the years I did sound healing and energy medicine. So everything rides on sound and frequencies and vibrations. So just as I knew that with crystal bowls and the language of light and toning, just as I knew that and the effect, like you knew, the effect on the body and the cleansing and the healing properties, so too the planets are vibratory frequencies. They all emit everything, and is alive and emits a sound and a vibration. So, and this is really trippy. When what was given to me is when you're reading a chart, what you're really reading is not a person's chart, and this is the hard part to put into English, but you're reading it's like the sound frequencies of the planets in their charts. I don't know. And then I got the impression that this is a very deep rabbit hole and that more would be revealed as I went on. So a few months later, I get this piece in meditation to sing the chart and to give people more of an experience of their chart. So get it off of paper as much as it's very important, and really have them connect with the experience of the stars. So
if I can interrupt, that makes sense from a scientific standpoint, because NASA, for example, has discovered all the planets have they emit sound. They have their own different frequencies of sound that they emit. Some of them are really freaky sounding, like Saturn has this really weird, creepy kind of sound. And you can go online and look this up. If you Google NASA music of the planets, I believe it is, you can listen to these recordings that NASA has of the different planets in our solar system. It's really fascinating. But
no surprise that Saturn has a heavy, because Saturn is that planet that's intense and heavy. And Mars, the other day, it was in when they landed on Mars, whatever they did, that whole NASA thing with Mars, the rover, I was going to say the Land Rover. They brought one of them, and they said that Mars, they got the sound of Mars, and it was like this heavy bass. And well, Mars is that heavy-duty masculine archetype, so yeah, no surprise. As above, so below.
And as you know, Nassim Haramein and other people have shown that all of the planets and the suns in the solar system have black holes in them. They basically act as portals. This whole cosmos is a web of these energies flowing between the planets and the suns, because they've got these interdimensional portals or black holes inside of them. Our sun has it, our Earth has it. All the planets and the suns have these black holes that act like relays for this energy through the cosmos. And I've done talks about this stuff, which you can see on YouTube, like my talk about the physics of consciousness. I get into some of the details of this, but it's these energies coming from the planets and the suns. It's scalar waves, it's sound, it's infrared, ultraviolet, it's all these different spectrums of energy, all different kinds of electromagnetic radiation, X-rays, all kinds of stuff that are being relayed through the planets and the suns, and they come to us. So it makes sense that these are going to have an effect on us when the planets and the suns are arranged in certain ways, especially when we're born. Because when we're born, one of the things that scientists have shown that pick up extremely weak fields and frequencies of energy are monoatomic minerals. They're actually superconductors in the right state, and they exist in living organisms, and they exist in us, but they exist in plants and animals, microbes, us, all kinds of stuff. And they actually are antennas that pick up this energy coming from the cosmos, what scientists call cosmic energy. What does that mean? It's scalar waves. It's this whole spectrum of energy coming from these different planets and suns, right? So from the moment that we are when we're an egg in our mother, and that sperm starts the birth process and the cells start dividing, the monoatomic elements in that fetus are being affected and imprinted on by the arrangement of these energies coming at it from the cosmos.
Wow, yeah.
So this is one of the physical influences of astrology and astronomy that
Where the rubber meets the road.
yeah, and so more and more science is coming out showing this, and epigenetics and various things. And so it's not woo age, new age, woo nonsense. There's a lot of science showing what's going on with this. So.
And I know on the other end of it, when a baby's born, Yogananda, who Paramahansa Yogananda wrote the Autobiography of a Yogi. It's a great spiritual classic. I think everyone who starts their spiritual path, like that's the first book, seems like everybody reads, and it's in a gazillion languages, and it's his life story. And he brought yoga to the United States. He brought yoga to the West in 1920. For those of you who are, maybe just learning about all these things. Anyway, the book is a spiritual classic, and he writes about his guru, who was Sri Yukteswar. And if you Google his, now it's a tough name to spell, but in Google Images and Bing Images, or any of those search engines, if you Google Sri Yukteswar quotes on astrology, and I love this quote. He said, "A child is born at the exact hour where the celestial rays are in mathematical harmony with his individual karma." So now it's taken everything you said about conception, and then even at the other end when it's being born, when I start a session with people, I say to them, look, okay, your birth date and time, this place in Missouri or wherever is this many degrees west latitude and north longitude, and all of that, it's a grid. It's like it's time and space. So you're gridded into time and space in that one moment. And according to Sri Yukteswar, who was a great master, I mean, this man, of course, he was a saint like Yogananda. He had siddhist powers. He could bilocate. There was all of these incredible, mystical stories that are contained in that book. Real life saints, that lived in the late 19th century, early 20th, up until he passed in 1936. Sri Yukteswar Yogananda passed away, I think it was 1952. So, were living saints, and they had these outrageous mystical experiences, so they knew it's not some made-up thing. But so the comment he made is very, very striking, that when you think about it, and it really does fry your noodle to think about how you can literally have mathematically what your karma looks like. But I know it as an astrologer. You look at a chart and it's a bunch of glyphs, symbols, and numbers, and all of them in different, like a sacred geometry pattern, and everyone, it's like a fingerprint. Every single chart is different from the next, because we're all born in different moments and different places on the planet. So all of that coalesces into this outrageous story of your life, of the karma that you're here to work through, to create good karma, to make any corrections, the kinds of journeys you would take in order to realize yourself. But again, always free will in there. But it does give you an enormous amount of information. And what I love too is that it confirms things that you have deep in your heart, that you've always felt about yourself, or maybe you never gave yourself permission to feel good about, or to, maybe you beat yourself up or did beat yourself up about something in your life, and you find out, you know what, it was all perfect, and you can mathematically locate that. And then that's so, for me, that's so reassuring, and for so many people that I talk to, that they get closure on things, that they weren't mess ups and they weren't screw ups, and so it gives us a bigger picture and a different, very powerful context in which to live our lives. Very powerful. It's about self-empowerment and breakthroughs and transformation, not being this fatalistic, oh, you must do this and it's never going to change, and none of that.
That's true. Years ago, probably 25, 30 years ago, when I first bumped into this, like I said, through my friend, I was so impressed that I started studying it. Now, you have to understand, back in those days, I was in computer science and engineering. I was heavy into
Mr.
technical
Left
stuff.
Brain.
Yeah. And so, math, science is not a problem for me at all. But I found when I started studying astrology, number one, I didn't find any really good teachers of it at that time. And it seemed very, very tedious to me to learn, right? And what I discovered over time was that I didn't really need to get into the details of how it worked because I feel it. I feel it. It's
highly
like
intuitive.
Yeah, I guess being a Pisces, I know when stuff's going on. So I don't, it's like when I do find out from people like you what's going on, it's like, yeah.
Because you felt it.
Yeah. And so I kind of intuitively know how to navigate based on what I'm feeling. So it's rare that I actually, I don't sit and watch the charts and go, ooh, this is going on, and therefore I don't do that. I just, when stuff becomes unusual, I'll go, let me check and see what's going on. And if it becomes really intense, I call people like you up and go, what's going on?
Oh no, I'm getting chased.
But usually I don't, just because I same thing like with psychics. It's like years ago, a lot of times I'll have psychics come up to me and just tell me, give me some reading or something unannounced. And what I've seen with that as well is that basically what they're doing is reading your field and the field of probabilities that you're tracking in that moment, which of course you can change. And so I found the same thing with psychic readings. I never really paid for psychic readings because I realized it's like I feel what's going on, and so I don't really need to hear it outside from myself, except once in a while. It's like usually again with event planning. Quite honestly, it's like I'll refer to somebody like you and say, like I know a lady out in Phoenix who's a really good astrologer and psychic. She's amazing. And years ago, actually, it was when I had death threats. I came out with a technology that the powers that be didn't like, and I started getting death threats. And back in the 90s, I had worked with free energy technology, so I knew to take it seriously. So I called her up just to kind of get another opinion on what I was feeling, and she
confirmation.
Yeah, and boy, did she confirm it ever. She confirmed it way more than what I was feeling, and I was like, ooh. So I changed path, and I, came out okay. But
yeah, I love doing that for people, is confirming, I get, wow, you've been going through hell, and they're like, yeah, oh God, how do you know? I'm like, no, let me tell you about it. I'm like, no, you don't have to tell me. I can tell you.
Yeah.
Here's when it started. Here's when it's coming back. Frameworks. You can look at everything, and there's what I call it the Farmer's Almanac of Astrology. And it's called an ephemeris, and you can see the positions of all the planets, so you know how long something's going to last, which is so good to know that if you're having a rough time, is this going to last for 8 years, or is this going to last for 8 days or 8 months? It's just nice to have some kind of sense of things, so you're not, wondering. And I feel bad when, I really have such compassion for people who are going through hard times, and they end up taking, drugs or doing drugs or, alcohol or what have you, and a lot of suffering, which is unnecessary. If you were to look at a chart and say, hey, you know what, it's okay, you're going through this kind of little quiet time right now, and it's outrageous, because things do move. Everything always moves in cycles, and the way, getting famous, it could be just the very next year. Let's say a person who, I remember I heard this on this astrology webinar. It was really fascinating. It showed it's called a progressed moon chart. I won't get into all the details of what that is, but it's basically moon cycles through your life. And so they took Paul McCartney's chart, and they showed where, really you could literally mathematically graph it, where he had those quiet years with the Beatles. Remember, they were in Hamburg and playing these little low-rent places and trying to get into the big time, and literally the curve, it's like a sine curve. So it's really fascinating. And if he had stopped, he would have missed this incredible opening that, completely changed the world. But you can see exactly where it peaked was 1964 to 67, 68, 69, and then it started falling in 1970. When did they break up? 1970. So it's really fascinating to see how everything, moves together.
Yeah, and also too, you're talking about your friend on Wall Street who was into astrology astrology. This is something that a lot of people don't realize, is that people at the highest echelons of power on this planet are deep into astrology. You know, bankers, the Vatican. You know, the Vatican on the one hand, they have an observatory, they have a telescope. Why does the Vatican need a telescope and an astronomical observation point?
Yeah, that's true. It's like, do the Buddhists have? Does the Dalai Lama have an observatory?
Exactly.
He has his observatory.
It's because they're secretly deep into astrology, deep into astronomy, looking at what's going on in the cosmos, while they ridicule it and dismiss it and call it demonic, so that the unwashed masses won't be empowered by the secret knowledge that they have.
Well, I have this. I came up with this kind of theory about where astrology is right now going through a renaissance, and I don't mean a renaissance like the Italian Renaissance of the 15th century. What I mean is that for so many years, I feel like very much the way yoga, for thousands of years, yoga had become this secretive discipline that was only in a body of knowledge that was only known to very few and kept alive in ashrams and monasteries and such. And then it was not until really like the 20th century that it came full bore, mainly through Vivekananda and Paramahansa Yogananda in the 20th century. And as a result, boom, 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 the whole planet gets turned on to yoga, and it's embraced on a massive scale where it was held for so many years. And I feel that the same thing is happening with astrology, that we're going through this where people are waking up. I mean, there's been major news stories in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Atlantic, all your millennial websites. The millennials are all over this, and there's a good reason. Astrologically there is, but I'll tell you a bit later. To me, it's very obvious, but Leo Aquarius eclipse cycle, that's all I can say. Aquarius rules astrology. We just went through a year and a half of eclipses in Leo and Aquarius, and so no surprise that it became extremely popular now. But it's really, I think that what happened to yoga is now happening to astrology, and that's why I started my podcast, STARSOUND Speaks. It's funny, it's light, it's humorous, and it's educational, but it's not this heavy bore, kind of academic thing. It's really it's really for people who are fascinated and have been like I was and like you were with, I think isn't that a horoscope? And they don't know. So they've been ignorant, and now we're just coming along saying, hey, guess what? Let's throw a few little tidbits out, and what do you think of this? And just kind of engage. And people don't have to become astrologers, but I feel it's fun, and the purpose of our podcast is to have to bring it to light and have people see how empowering they can use it to navigate their lives. So it's a powerful tool for transformation. But when you mentioned earlier about the Vatican, I thought, I also said that it's having I call it the Mary Magdalene moment. Whereas, growing up Catholic, what we learned about Mary Magdalene, she was the one, they always showed her in red, right? The lady in red. She was a hoe, and she was a hoe, okay? Oh. And she, and as the nuns, she washed her sins clean by, Jesus, he helped her get, of course that was the story, and you never heard much. It was just that she was this hoe, and that was it. And she, saw the light and then became a good girl. That was what we were told, and so many of us. But then here comes, Dan Brown, the famous, he was a Harvard-educated professor, teacher, and then novelist, best-selling novelist, The Da Vinci Code, and he wrote beautifully, incredibly researched, because it is, yes, he said it's fiction, but in the very beginning of the book, he prefaces it by saying, everything that's discussed here is actually true, all these secret societies and blah, 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 blah. And here's this, again, the New Yorker and me, the cynic, saying, okay, look, I don't want to look weird. This guy went to Harvard. He's no flake, he's not a snowflake. He's a snowflake, and he's got solid evidence. So I'm going to take a look. So I loved that book. But in that book, he talked about how Mary Magdalene was not this hoe that everybody wants you to believe. That she really had this very elevated. She was like Jesus's favorite person, and likely was married to him, and all this stuff that was very controversial for the church because that was not the party line. So we're now seeing, in the last 15 years or so, this whole new image of Mary Magdalene has come to the fore. So she wasn't like marginalized, you know. See, that's the thing. She was so powerful. But what did the Vatican do? They marginalized women and then they put them off to the side and, you know, call them prostitutes so people won't connect with the power of who they really were. And I feel it's the same thing that is happening now with astrology. It's like everybody is, astrology, you know, like it's an embarrassment, and it's like, oh, no more. Now we're seeing everything differently, and it's stepping out of that. If you marginalize something, like you said, you know, you're never gonna use that or find the truth.
I have a confession to make. Forgive me, Mother, for I have sinned. I was told by a...
You're doing it wrong. Wait a minute. No.
I don't know.
Well, that's bringing in an airplane.
I was raised Baptist.
Baptist?
Baptist.
Were you really?
Well, my dad was Catholic. My mother was Southern Baptist.
Oh, boy.
And I was screwed up.
No alcohol for you, mister. No.
We went to, for a while,
dancing.
we went to a non-denominational church. I don't remember much about it except, Kenny, you going to hell. I heard that a lot.
Kenny, you going to hell.
You going to hell. Blaspheme, you going to hell.
Blaspheme. Oh, my God.
But I was told by a psychic that I was actually on the Council of Nicaea that sliced and diced the Bible up and took out the feminine and took out the gods.
You did it. Oh, we found them.
I don't know if that's true, but I'm like, so, you know.
You sliced and diced.
Sorry.
I knew somebody did it. Sorry. Oops. Yeah, thanks a lot.
I didn't know better.
Oh, no. You were one of the editors. Where it's like, what did Richard Nixon do with the big black marker, right? And they like, the stuff.
Didacted.
Yeah.
Well, let's see, no female, no didacted. Goddess, didacted.
Didacted, yeah.
So sorry.
Powerful women. Not. Yeah. Well, guess what? We're
Mary
back
Magdalene
now.
Ho. Yes, leave that in.
Yeah, really.
So anyway, that reminds me too. Nancy Reagan. That was another person. She was deep into astrology. If you remember, it even got into the mainstream news.
Joanne Quigley. Yeah.
Yeah, lots of high-profile people. But yeah, I agree. You know, the more that we have people like Nassim Haramein and other astronomers and cosmologists coming out and explaining how things work, astrology doesn't sound so woo-woo anymore. Yeah.
Right. And you know, here's what I discovered, which I found was fascinating. Up until about the time of the Renaissance, up until roughly, I want to say 1500s, 1600s, right after the Renaissance, in order to get a medical degree, you had to study and pass an astrology exam. That astrology and astronomy were one discipline. And people don't know that. Again, there's so much that has been lost that is now coming to light. So astronomy being the study of the stars and the scientific, right? The weight, the mass, the gravitational pull. That's all wonderful, useful, but in that age is when things started getting separated. So the power, the archetypes and the symbology and the information that was all lost about what that planet represented. So it was just simply, well, what it represents is it weighs this much, and it's all this left brain stuff. So the left brain and the right brain got separated. So it's they called it, what did we learn in school? The age of reason. Well, I've started calling it the age of treason. It's like you separated the left and the right brain, the holistic, the understanding of what is Mercury. Take Mercury, for example. Mercury is, as you know, as a scientist, Quicksilver, right? Well, Mercury, if you look at the myth and the archetype and the and all of that, the body of knowledge, Mercury was the shapeshifter, and he was the messenger of the gods. So he would move into different dimensions. He would get messages from Mount Olympus, and then he'd share them with the masses. So that's code for the mind, communication, going in and out of different realms, shapeshifting, the trickster. Sometimes he would look like an old man, sometimes he'd look like a youth. The FTD florist symbol, that's Mercury, right? He's got the winged hat and the sandals, and he's fast and speedy. So Quicksilver, right? It's liquid metal. So you see, that's one very basic example of this very much, a simple example of there's this correlation between the two. But again, when things get separated, we lose that, and then we lose the understanding. So.
Right. And that symbology has been put in front of people, like you said, with corporate logos, which, there are lots of corporate logos. Now, for example, David Icke has pointed this out, Barbara Marciniak and others, where the people in power put their symbols of energetic symbols and symbols of power in their logos right in front of the public eye, in our money, the pyramid, the Eye of Horus, those kinds of things. Mercury, back in the 60s and 70s, the Mercury car company, I remember because my father actually worked at a Lincoln Mercury dealership, and they had the winged Mercury,
the logo,
yeah.
Right? So, and the Mercury dime, that was the old dime, was before the Roosevelt on the dime.
Yeah, exactly.
Mercury.
Why would you put that on your money? If you and I were designing money, why would we put the stuff that's on the U.S. money? Why would we do that? Hey, I know. Let's put a pyramid with an eyeball on top on the dollar, and let's get that Greek astrology, and let's pull some of that stuff out and throw it on here. And no, these are symbols of power that these people understand have power unto themselves, and they don't just symbolize, but they hold energy. It's kind of like almost like a scalar wave antenna to a certain degree. There's people like Ibrahim Karim, who's an Egyptian architecture professor, former architecture professor, who was studying the Egyptian hieroglyphs, and started to realize that the hieroglyphs themselves are scalar wave antennas, that they actually tune to scalar frequencies. And so he started building these little metal antennas that look like Egyptian hieroglyphs, and he can tune them to exact frequencies and use them for all kinds of stuff, healing, growing food. And in fact, we worked on a project for a company up in Canada who was building these pyramid-shaped greenhouses using my technology and his technology to make the plants. They were growing medical marijuana to make them grow bigger and stronger and have more nutrients. And it works.
Using the pyramid,
yeah. So there's a reason that this symbology is used in various ways and put in front of us. It's part of how the universe works energetically and through consciousness. When you see people like Peter Schenck of moderndayMystic.com, by the way. I love Peter, an amazing guy, and he's interviewed a lot of interesting people showing that he's got computer software that actually you can run it and it will generate scalar waves and alter things. It can structure water, it can change a lot of things physically. And I asked him, it's like, how does the mechanism work? And he said, well, it's really a symbol that's working through the consciousness of the person that's utilizing it. So it's like working with a person's own consciousness. So this symbology and the astrological arrangements, they work with our own physiology and our own consciousness to alter our reality.
Yeah, it's outrageous when you see what we go by, and the wisdom behind astrology is as above, so below, and that everything is interconnected. So when you start seeing that, I mean, goodness gracious, how many examples? I can give you 10 million hours of examples.
Well, I get into that deep in my video. For folks that are interested, if you on YouTube, if you search on Ken Rohla Physics of Consciousness, you can find my video that goes into that for 2 hours about how all this stuff works at a galactic level, how the cosmos is this big matter energy system, and it's not just physical reality, it's multidimensional. There's different frequencies of existence. 3D or physical reality is just a certain band of existence, but these energies flow through everything and they're relayed through the planets and the suns, and that energy that's flowing through everything, scientists are calling it scalar waves. It's been called a lot of other names, orgone or chi or prana or whatever. 0 point energy, et cetera, et cetera. What it is it's superluminal light. It's light energy that's flowing through everything, and it's what everything in the physical universe is made of ultimately, because this energy slows down and it coagulates into physical matter, and so it can alter or create matter. And we are antennas for this energy. And as you mentioned, as above, so below, at every scale of the cosmos, from the galactic scale to the subatomic scale, scale, you have this recurring geometry that this energy flows through and captures it and does things with it. And so at our scale, the human body is an antenna that picks this energy up. We're actually what scientists call a fractal antenna. We're
Right.
We are a fractal antenna. I mean, our bodies are a fractal. A fractal is just a branching like a tree. And so plants, animals, people, cells, molecules, on and on, even atomic particles, they're all fractal antennas that capture this energy and radiate it, and it can alter matter. So it makes sense that these planetary arrangements that are emitting all these different kinds of energy, including scalar waves, are going to have an effect on physical reality.
Right, and you know that you've seen those really cool videos of somebody's eye, a close-up of an iris, and then it pulls out further and further and further, and it ends up being out in space. Like the galaxy looks just like an iris. It's like, wow, there it is, as above, so below. It's all a fractal. Fractal.
Exactly. And so I want to get back to what's been going on in the last 6 weeks, and then we'll get into medical astrology.
Sure.
As of, I started noticing this right around the beginning of November 2018, and now it's about 6 weeks later, and things seem to be settling down now. I know Mercury retrograde just ended, a couple days ago?
Yeah, and we had 2 retrogrades of personal planets. Personal planets means ones that are closest to Earth, so Mercury, Venus, and Mars are the personal planets in astrology, so they really affect our personality. The further out we go into the solar system, for example, Pluto is, I don't believe this demotion stuff. You know what? They went back and they said, okay, it's a planet. We never, just ignore that. It's got a lot of effect. It's why you see so many things dismantling right now with our society completely being purged. Is Pluto in Capricorn for the last 10 years. Capricorn rules governments and society, and Pluto is about the complete purging of the darkest things, and it's a renewal. But first you have to purge, and the shadow part comes out. But anyway, I digress. Sorry. I was saying, so why, when you asked about that? Well, Mercury and Venus were, first it was Venus retrograde in October into November, and then this year it happened that the day Venus went direct, in other words, it looked like an apparent backward motion in the sky, and then it turned around and went direct. The day it did that, Mercury went retrograde, so it was doing this little dance, So that is, and again, hitting a very sensitive point in your chart, which is why you felt it more perhaps than the next person. And it depends where it fell in your chart versus, it's the next person. You would have that experience in that whatever certain way that was.
Well, I've talked to quite a few people that it seems that a lot of folks have been going through stuff, some a lot more intense than what I have experienced. And so I was just curious, and I don't know if it was you or somebody who was an astrologer was telling me that in my case, I guess it had to do with hidden enemies and other people's money. Which is exactly what was going on.
Yeah, that was, Venus was retrograde in Scorpio, which rules other people's money and criminality, deception.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We had behind the scenes.
Yeah, we had 3 cases of fraud with my company, and it nearly bankrupted us. Actually, it was really intense. But in one case it was a customer, and in 2 other cases there were vendors overseas, just totally ripped us off for large amounts of money. And so, I've never experienced anything like that before in the past, but
it definitely hit that sensitive point.
It was very interesting.
And it's a wake-up call to say, okay, maybe the people or the things that you think are a certain way really aren't, and it was just the universe saying, okay, it's time to look at these things. Because when things go retrograde, the planets, of course, no planet ever moves backwards. It's just from the position of Earth, everything in perspective, but every so often, depending on what planet it is, with Mercury it's 3 times a year, with Venus it's about every year and a half, it will look as if when it lines up close, it's kind of like the wheels on a highway. You remember as a kid you'd watch cars passing you and it looked like the wheels were spinning backwards. Well, that's the same concept. So when something retrogrades, it's like that planet for whatever amount of time. In the case of Venus, it's 6 weeks, and you go back and review things. Venus rules personal finance, do you think? In your case, personal finance, our talents, our skills, our value system. These are things, some of the many things it rules. So these are the things that came up for review, and to say, well, is this really what I value, or do I need to look here at, what do I need to look at in terms of things that were hidden?
Exactly.
And maybe you had been...
well, I'll tell you, I know exactly what it was for me, and this is how I look when anything challenging comes up for me. I look at it like, the first thing I do, especially when something really unexpected comes up, I go, wait a minute, what's this really about? What's the bigger picture here? And so for me, the positive aspect of this is it allowed my company to reevaluate, because it created this whole cascade of events. It wasn't just like, oh, we lost some money. It created this whole cascade of events that created a lot of difficulties. But it allowed us as a company to become more bulletproof in the future, not just against fraud, but against a lot of different potentially negative aspects in banking in particular. It's like
Scorpio rules banking.
Right.
So
we had all of our eggs in one basket, banking wise, not just with banks, but credit card processors and all this stuff. So now we've got backup systems. We've got all kinds of things, so that if we have difficulties in various ways, we've got backup systems in place now.
Yeah, I always say so it was not done to you, being a victim. The universe does things for you, not to you.
Right.
So
it wasn't fun, but it was an opportunity to make things better. So the next time around, if anything,
it won't happen again.
Yeah, it won't happen.
It was
again.
like saying, hey, this is where you need to, there's a hole in this fence, so let's patch that up. And and that's exactly, So it wasn't. I know for me it wasn't easy either. I had a couple of some graces. I know during Venus retrograde is not a good time to sell luxury items or high ticket items, and I noticed there was something I noticed online that was being sold. There was this big promo, and I'm thinking, that's a high ticket item. I don't think they're really gonna do so well with that. And sure enough, you could tell they were kind of like struggling making sales. I'm like, okay, interesting. And I remember one of my clients who's a realtor, real estate, and she was, kind of singing the blues. Oh, it's been really tough getting, selling houses. And I'm like, look, okay, Venus is retrograde right now. It's, it's a little bit slow, but don't worry. I said, here, starting X date, it was November 6th or whatever it was, here, it's going to shift. You're going to see. So just hang in there a little longer. Sometimes that's all somebody needs, and that's a huge load to know that it's something that's not going to last forever. But yes, there are always cycles to things. So if you plan accordingly, you can just ride those waves, and that's what I do. I always look at a calendar, and I remember when I was doing my corporate job, I remember I said my boss was thinking about taking on this client who to do this a tournament or something, a golf tournament, and she gave me the information about when this particular event they wanted it to happen, and I looked and I said that's smack dab in the middle of Mercury retrograde. I said if I were you, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I'm just saying this is tough. And that person, the client had already sunk like $100,000 into to make something happen. And I said, you know what, you don't want to be caught holding the ball, not with that, and because it's not the cycles are not with you on this for what if they want to wait a month, but they couldn't wait. And I said, and she was so glad she didn't take it, for lots of reasons, but I did give her that, it's just, why not? I mean, there are people who want to use tools powerfully. Yeah, use every tool at your disposal. There's a lot going on, and we want to be in sync as much as possible. I remember I was listening on an astrology webinar. This wonderful woman was talking about, I think she was about Chinese astrology, but she said that in the old days, in the tribal days, the leader of the country would actually consult astrologically about the movements and cycles of patterns and planets and things, what would be best for the country. So he would look and see what is best and where these are going to happen and what kind of transits and challenging things and beneficial to assist the country. And I thought, wow, can you imagine if leaders of countries sat sat down, instead of like a State of the Union address, it would be like they sat down and go, okay, everybody, we have a Saturn retrograde coming up. Let's all go within and really feel, what's missing, what structures and organizations need to be realigned here in your own life, and how can we all come together to use this energy wisely, collectively, that we're all moving and we're all on board. That would be mind-blowing, that everybody would agree on this.
The powers that be do that. If you watch what's going on astrologically, and you look at world events and what's going on with the power structures on this planet, they take action based on astrology.
Well, I found it very interesting that the Deutsche Bank raid, there was like 170 agents raided Deutsche Bank. Well, Uranus went into Taurus after, it's about an 8-year transit, and it went into Taurus last May, and then it went in retrograde fairly recently, and it's going to complete its retrograde right after the new year and go direct. But the point at which it went over from 0 degrees of Taurus back into 29, there are a lot of banks that are, that's a sensitive point. They actually have natal charts at that point. So when that Uranus, which is the planet of rebellion and kind of, wake up, shake up, break up is what I call Uranus energy, and it's revolutionary and it's innovative, and it'll liberate us from whatever needs to be, where we're in slavery with whatever it is. In the sign of Taurus, it would be, our value systems, personal finances, banking, money, the stock market. So yes, if you looked in the headlines, the stock market has been very up and down, and there was a huge sell-off, and you could see it to the very day. Now, I don't want people calling me to say, please straighten. I am not a financial astrologer. I don't do that. There are financial astrologers, but I'm not one of them. I'm here to, assist people to create like powerful lives. But it is very real, and it's pretty fascinating when you have your hands on the levers, so to speak, and how to create that, to assist. What I love about Uranus and Taurus is, yes, it is, Uranus transits are never, they're never easy. Now, I know there's a thought bubble. I feel it. I know it's coming. I know. No. We are not going to have, we're not going to have Uranus jokes.
I'll just put it this way.
The mic.
People from the South, you see, she's talking all posh here, you see? In the South, we call it Uranus.
No, stop it. No. That is like so strange. You cannot be friends with astrologers and try to give them the Uranus jokes. Doesn't work.
No, we grew up, seriously, I grew up in North Carolina in the South in the 60s and 70s. We called it Uranus because that's what everybody called it.
Okay, but it's all that hard. Yeah, well, you don't
me while I eat my scones and fly my spacecraft to Uranus. Yes.
So, all right. Now that's moving right along.
We had to say it.
I knew. I felt it coming. All right. But anyway, so Uranus and Taurus. What is Taurus? The bull. Well, what's outside Wall Street? The bull of Wall Street. That when all those tourists have their picture taken next to that giant bull, and it's bullion. The word bullion comes from bull. Because bulls and cattle used to be currency in the old days. So that word originates. So stock, right? Cattle, stock, the stock market. So Uranus in the sign of the revolutionary planet, the great disruptor, as they call Uranus, in the sign of the bull is like the bull in the china shop. It's just shattering old comfort zones around money and values, and Uranus is also it's Aquarian energy, so it's the Aquarian age of compassion and working together as a society and being progressive and future solutions. Solar energy, solar panels, and scalar energy, all those fantastic pyramid things that's all cool Uranus stuff, and that's transforming society. So first we got to break free of, we had toxic masculinity. That's more of a Pluto, Saturn, and Pluto in Capricorn, but Uranus energy in Taurus is breaking free of any kind of the corporate structures that have been very favoring the oligarchy and not, helping the masses. So it's good. It's not easy. Uranus energy it's like when you take that picnic tablecloth and you go, whew! It's like not easy. But ultimately, it's like we said earlier, it's done for you. No, it's not done to you. It's to benefit. You always, you come out ahead, even though it's a scary ride. You always come out ahead.
All right, so let's tie this into health, because I know you're into medical astrology, and people may wonder, why the heck would I have an astrologer on a Fresh and Alive channel? But it's because this has to do with health. So let's talk
not
about
just consciousness,
let's talk about medical astrology.
What's pretty fascinating about we were saying earlier how in order to be a physician up until the Renaissance, you had to study and pass an astrology exam. So for centuries, it was always understood that the stars and the planetary bodies emitted frequencies, and like as above, so below, so one would influence the other. Well, that all, like we said, it kind of started, taking that fork in the road in that time period. But what I find fascinating is that of course, regardless of what people think, facts are facts, and how people came to these archetypes, it was empirical. It's observation. So you go back to the Babylonians and the Chaldeans, and they had a lot of time in their hands. They didn't have cell phones, they didn't have apps, and they didn't have all that stuff. So they'd stare at the heavens, and watch and correlate. They'd see that when a certain planet was in a certain position, a certain event was happening on Earth. So they started, there's a connection here, and they started connecting the dots. So in medical astrology, for example, Mars, it's a very, very deep subject, obviously, and there are people who are it's like cardiology and neurology. These are all branches and specialties of astrology. But when we want to look at our health, for some tips here, some basic stuff for people to kind of get their feet wet. Mars and Saturn is where you probably want to start. Mars rules the physical body, and so and Saturn is a planet that's very challenging. It's the teacher, it's responsibility and integrity and such. So when they make challenging aspects in our chart, that's one place where health issues can turn up. I know for me, it happened over the summer. I had Mars was in a very was in a challenging aspect in my chart, and it was affecting that's when I had this tooth issue going on, so a gum and tooth, and so it was interesting because I was having this problem, so I went to my chart and I looked and I said, there it is. I mean, it nailed exactly, and then I could see how long it would last, and then it would come back and hit that point again, so I was ready. I got this great homeopathic from my fantastic homeopathic physician, Dr. Solara. Awesome. It grew my enamel back and assisted, and was able to pull I actually saved myself from a root canal. I mean, it was that phenomenal. But I worked it. So I took the information in my chart and the timings of things, and I used that powerfully, and I did a really intense, disciplined healing process with my teeth, various supplements and things, and her wise guidance, and I got through it. And I knew that it was going to come back again, or that opportunity, and sure enough, it was fine. I had done the work the first time, so that by the time it had gone retrograde, gone direct over it, it was done. I felt this little frisson of sensitivity, but no, I did the work. So I used the chart to make sure I steered myself into a powerful place with my own chart. So Mars, Saturn. Saturn rules the teeth, the knees, the bones. Primarily. Your sixth, there's houses in astrology, and houses are kind of like, in Western astrology, they look like slices of a pie.
And they correspond to sections of space, right?
Right. There's 360 degrees to a circle, and there are 12 houses in astrology. Each one of them has a constellation associated with it, and there's the 12 constellations, and each of them is 30 degrees, 12 times 30, 360. You know, there's our math. And anyway, the 6th house in astrology is basically it's your health house, and it's also ruled traditionally. The ruler of that house is Virgo, which rules the colon. So you know, depending on, if you have planets in that house, what they are, and the sign it's in, and the aspects it makes to other planets and other signs and things, and you'll see, and then that can create, if somebody's, you know, sometimes you'd see kids growing up and they'd be sickly, and you'd hear your mother say, oh, that kid, he's just a sickly child, and you're like, wow, what is that somebody's like always sick or can't seem to be well? You know, some people have a real challenge with health, as you know, being in the business, and others, it's like they can sail through. And well, they have challenging aspects, you know, typically with Saturn or Mars, and you know, a lot of there's an aspect in astrology. It's called an inconjunct, and this is deep. You know, we're not going to have to get technical here, but it's 150 degrees, and in medical astrology, that's considered that's challenging. And they look at if you have these inconjuncts in the chart, that is where it's a chronic stress point. So the analogy I like to use is, it's like you know, you buy those cheap umbrellas from some guy in the street, you know, and then they're terrible, and you open it up, and the wind and the rain, and you know, and then the dang thing breaks, right? And you've got this one, you know, thing, right? And the rest of it's working, but this one, you know, you got to be careful.
Spines is hanging down.
Yeah, and the water's coming on you and dripping, and you got to twirl it. And, you don't want to poke yourself in the eye. And you know, it's like that to me is like an inconjunct or a quincunx. It's called. These are, you know, like, again, technical terms, but it's really difficult to deal with that, and it's a chronic stress, right? As long as you have that umbrella, man, that thing, you got to manage that. You got to keep making sure you're not going to get poked or wet, or you know, it's uncomfortable. So those are aspects that again, that you see, and it's fascinating. You see this whole picture of what your you know, your chart looks like. I have very good aspects with Saturn and my Sun, so and I remember back when I had my teeth straightened, orthodontia as a kid, I can still remember my orthodontist saying, oh, you got good strong teeth, and then I never forgot that, and sure enough, I actually see it in my chart where I have good strong teeth. So some people aren't that lucky with that, but it is pretty fascinating to see, you know, where these things play out, and then depending on the planets that are transiting, when I saw you know, a tumor, for example, that's, you know, Neptune rules tumors, and you know, if somebody's got a brain tumor, it could be, you know, transiting Neptune. I know one person's chart has you know, through a 3rd house, which is the mind, the brain, there it is, you know, so you know, it's very interesting.
How can somebody use this knowledge? Let's say somebody who's wanting to maintain their health, or somebody who's sick, or a doctor or a healthcare practitioner. How can they use knowledge of medical astrology to benefit themselves?
Well, I will say before I go further, of course, you know, you always want to, this is not, you know, I'm not telling people to stop seeing a doctor or stop taking medicine. I mean, you know, you're in charge of your health. You have to be wise and responsible, but I find it's good to get to know your chart and look and see where those health challenges are in the chart, and depending on certainly transits and progressions. Progressions is another measuring, a system of measuring, and where you see where you've grown since the day you arrived on the planet, and where planets have moved, kind of like tree rings of a tree, where you get growth. And so when transits and progressed planets aspect, you know, trigger points in your chart, that's when you'll have certain health events. So if you know ahead of time, you can shore up and if you know that something's coming where it could be challenging, you could maybe, let's say it's a knee thing, well, you could be taking yoga, you could be doing some good physical exercise to strengthen yourself so that, when a challenge comes, you're just better equipped to handle it. And in some cases, you could maybe mitigate it all the way, or at least a good portion of it.
That's how I do it. When I look at what's going on, especially when I'm traveling overseas, because traveling overseas can be very challenging, maintaining diet and stuff like that. And also you're getting exposed to massive amounts of radiation up in planes and EMF and all kinds of stuff. So knowing astrologically what's going to be going on at the time I'm traveling helps me to be more diligent than I might not be if I didn't have that knowledge.
Yeah, it's just knowledge is power, so when you know and you study, it's very easy to find this information online, the parts of the body, and each one of them in astrology, each part of the body from head to toe is ruled the constellations, starting with the head. Aries rules the head, Taurus rules the neck and the jaw. It progresses. Aries, Taurus, Gemini. Gemini is the twins, right? The twins in the archetype. So lungs are twins, arms and legs are twins, right? Two sides, and so it rules arms, the lungs, and then Cancer rules the breasts and the stomach, and so on and so forth. And it goes all the way down to the feet. Pisces rules the feet. So if you look back in your life, you can also see, when I had that accident, or when I had that such and such surgery, you could literally see everything in the chart. It's pretty fascinating, to go back in time and go, when that really intense thing happened, what was
Speaking
going on?
of going back in time, that reminds me, off camera, you told me about our good friend Hippocrates, or as you posh people might pronounce it, Hippocrates.
Hippocrates, right.
Was, what did he say about astrology?
He was, so here's the Hippocratic oath that you take, right? Do they still take that when they graduate from medical school, right? From people in medical.
Yeah, what did he say? You got
He said, I got it right here. He said, a physician, remember that he lived in the 1st century AD. He said, a physician without a knowledge of astrology has no right to call himself a physician.
Wow.
Ooh.
Wow.
Yeah. And what about the Hippocrates Health Institute? I wonder if they know he said that.
Yeah, really. Well, it's, and I'm sure they've got people on staff there that are in astrology, because I know some of the folks down there.
Pythagoras was also a mathematician. We all remember 10th grade, the Pythagorean theorem.
Probably
A squared plus Socrates. You can take the boy.
You posh people might call him Socrates.
What kind of cheese? Socrates? Oh my God, where did we get him from? Where did he get what's that, the hook?
But I found it fascinating that Hippocrates said that, because that implies that he was using astrology in his practice.
Oh heck yeah! No, these guys, Hippocrates, Pythagoras, Ptolemy, Paracelsus. I mean, this goes back thousands of years, and Tetrabiblos is like the I think it's the oldest surviving astrological text from Ptolemy. And there is a Roman poet named Manilius. Well, they attribute it to Manilius. There was an 8,000 verse poem called Astronomica, and 8,000 verses. Yeah, I mean, it's just so there again. It's the idea of this huge body of knowledge that for so many centuries has been hidden and covered up, and now it's coming out. Just like Pluto and Capricorn, Capricorn rules archaeology. What are we seeing? All these digs, right? All these mummies and things under Bosnian pyramids, and
Samir Osmanagic, the archaeologist who discovered the Bosnian pyramids. He recently he went to India and was looking at a mountain called Mount Kailash, and discovered that it's a pyramid.
Really?
It's a huge pyramid, yeah.
Right, and that the Tibetan, that's a very, very sacred mountain to Tibetan Buddhists, all Buddhists. They can't climb it. They can only circumambulate. Mount Kailash.
But he was, and he's said this publicly in his public talks and YouTube videos and things, that, he could not get funding from any normal sources to do archaeological exploration of the Bosnian pyramids, and so he's having to do it himself, getting funding and stuff, and he is doing it and showing. I mean, now there's just unequivocal evidence that these structures in Bosnia are pyramids. They're not mountains, as some people have said. I think Graham Hancock went there early on when they hadn't excavated much, and came back saying that he just thought they were mountains. Anyone who knows how to generate scalar waves, particularly with pyramids, it's obvious that they are not. But aside from that, Samira has done a lot of hard science, measuring the energy coming off of them and showing that they are not mountains. They are nothing like the mountains in the areas. Even mountains that look like pyramids that aren't pyramids, they're not the same. And also, too, people are going inside these things and getting healed of major diseases like stage 4 cancer and diabetes, Parkinson's disease, and all kinds of stuff. So they're definitely not. But what's happening, because he's self-funded and he doesn't have the monetary hand constricting what he can do, he's able to tell the truth, and he's attracting a lot of archaeologists who are very interested in the truth. And so I really think he's been a huge catalyst in getting a lot of the secret knowledge in archaeology that's coming out. And of course, you're seeing the same thing, that thousands and thousands of years ago, people were studying astrology. And I just saw an interview David Wilcock did recently on Gaia.com on his disclosure program with a guy named Pete Peterson. And Pete Peterson claims he's a scientist who, I can tell you from what he's said about the things that I know about in science, the guy is spot on. But Pete Peterson was saying that he actually got access to the Vatican archives and was able to look at texts that were 7,200 years old.
Whoa!
And so he was.
How did he get in there? Do you have a library card?
Yeah. Because he's such a brilliant scientist and he's working on covert programs for the military and secret space programs, he got access to the Vatican archives to study them so that they could understand what the ancients knew that might help us in the present to develop technologies for space travel and all kinds of stuff. And it's really fascinating information that he came out with. But the fact that he's saying that the Vatican's got texts that are 7,200 years old.
Wow.
And maybe older stuff.
Wow.
It goes way beyond what we've been publicly told about the history of humanity.
Yeah, and so when I hear stories like that, I automatically assign that astrologically. Pluto in Capricorn, Pluto hidden knowledge, kept secreted away, and the light is being shown on this. And Capricorn rules our legacy, our ancestry. It's it's a cardinal earth sign, so it's the wealth of the earth. You could say Capricorn, Saturn energy is the wealth of the earth. So all of this knowledge and information is coming up. It's pretty exciting, when you think about it. By the way, the Pluto and Capricorn transit, we still got it several years left. I think it's 2023. It finally moves out of Capricorn. So we got another 5 years of it. It takes about 18 years on average for Pluto to go through a sign. So that rules an entire generation of people. So we were saying earlier about Dan Brown, the Da Vinci Code. When that book was published, Pluto was in Sagittarius. Well, Sagittarius, religion, organized religion. So there's shining light on these hidden things like, Mary Magdalene and all of the Da Vinci stuff that was in that book. And now it's, been in Capricorn, so all these revelations about government coming up and the dismantling of old power structures, because Capricorn is structure. So all these structures that no longer serve us are what's coming up. And when I see clients, in their own lives, it's like, okay, how is this playing out? Wherever Pluto is transiting through your chart is where you're seeing this dismantling of your belief systems, on a microcosmic, it's the macrocosm and the microcosm. And so where are our belief systems being dismantled, in what area of our life? So that's fascinating to see where it is, and what aspects it makes. But we are. This is what's so outrageous. This coming year, we have Saturn jumping over to that. I'm digressing. Should I go back to that?
Actually, no, you're not digressing. We'll get back to the medical astrology stuff to the extent you want to cover it, and then we'll get into what's coming and some other things.
Oh, okay. So let me back
So
to
let's jump
medical.
back to Hippocrates and medical
Hippocrates, yes.
astrology.
Packing crates, Hippocrates. Oh my God, where did we get him from? I don't know. Like, North Carolina. They're like, okay. Nostradamus. All right. Hippocrates. You know, these dudes are like, what do they say now? They were woke. They were woke dudes.
They was
okay.
woke.
Yeah, woke dudes. Chill
They be
and
woke.
woke. Yes. Excuse me. Let me dab. You don't get dab. Come on. You gotta dab.
I don't know that.
Dabbing. Yeah.
dabbing.
He doesn't know dabbing.
I ain't that
Hang
woke.
around kids. You
I
know.
ain't that woke. Yeah, I'm old. I don't know the
Dabbing. All right, Nostradamus was chill. So he was the seer, the prophet, the fascinating documentaries about him and all of his prophecies and these mystical quatrains that he wrote. He was an astrologer. He was a physician, so naturally in the 16th century, you were also an astrologer. But he was another one. I know, let's see, Einstein, coming back and coming in the modern age, Einstein studied astrology.
Really?
Yeah. He there was, again, you can go on YouTube and Google and see these beautiful quotes on astrology. And if you'd Googled Einstein astrology, I don't know it by heart, but he said astrology had given him a very wonderful body of knowledge, and he was grateful for it.
Interesting.
So yeah, it's like the stuff that Carl Jung. Oh, don't get me started. The archetypes that he talks about. I mean, that he actually studied astrology, and he would pull astrology charts, when he was having difficulty diagnosing patients. He would pull their astrological chart, and it would give him some insight. And so the archetypes and all that information that we are so indebted to him for, where did that come from? You go you dig deep, and you see it's
And Edgar Casey, too.
Yeah. Oh my God, Edgar Casey's got the largest medical library in the world, right? Isn't it like 40,000 transcripts when he was
it's huge.
Trans-channel?
It's huge.
Yeah, very much about astrology. Oh, and Yogananda, in his autobiography, we said earlier, he talked about having his guru, Sri Yukteswar, came to him and said, you're going to, because, he very, a master, he saw what was going to happen in the future, and he said to him, you're going to have an illness in X number of days or weeks, and it's going to be really, really debilitating. However, if you wear this, it was like an amulet, a certain metal bangle, if you wear this bangle for X number of days or weeks, it will mitigate it greatly. So naturally, Yogananda did that, and he said he did get sick exactly when Sri Yukteswar said he was going to get sick, and it exactly lasted as long as it did. But he said, if you don't wear this, it's going to be really rough, and it might be, I'm just going to say, for example, take a 6-week illness and bring it down to 6 days. Well, who wants to be sick for longer than they have to? And there's these really cool pictures of Yogananda on his sitting in meditation, and you see him. They're kind of rare pictures. You don't normally find them, but he wore 3 bangles, according to this one website I researched. He had a 9-gem astrological bangle. One was made of lead and silver, which was talked about in the Autobiography of a Yogi, and the other was made of pure silver, copper, and gold. Right, the Ormus minerals. Silver has a similar electromagnetic radiations to the moon. So there's the correlation with astrology. Copper, Mars, and gold is related to the sun electromagnetically. Lead is represented by Saturn. So again, these are things that would assist him, especially during challenging transits. So there's Yogananda wearing, so yes, the connection with the ancient body of knowledge is deep and rich and fascinating, and it's like it's a long way from that newspaper horoscope. It is like totally not that.
Exactly, and I think we've been purposely steered away from the real power of astrology, even the fact that it's not called astronomy. It's like there's been this separation of astronomy, which is legit, and astrology, which in the mainstream is not legit.
Right. Yeah, it's like part of that.
Where did that digression come from?
Yeah. Well, back to the age of treason. I get snarky. Can I say? It's the age of It's like, wait a minute, that sounds like this really rich, it's almost like you're taking whole wheat and then you make like Wonder Bread out of it. It's like you've taken the germ of like the real stuff and you've reduced it to this thing
hybridized,
that's,
genetically modified ad infinitum.
But I'm certainly not putting down anything that science, I'm totally, it's absolutely valid, the rational mind and the whole scientific body of knowledge that astronomy represents. Of course, it's not like we're not negating that. We're just saying it's time now to weave back what was originally unified.
Pete Peterson said this in the same interview with David Wilcock, and I've also heard this from other high-level scientists that are really brilliant, like one guy who worked for the NSA doing very top secret advanced stuff, that when you pull consciousness out of science, then your science is bogus. It doesn't work.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, because consciousness is a form of scalar energy. It's a form of superluminal light, and it factors into the physics of our reality because consciousness affects our physical reality, in a very fundamental, real way. Like when I was in engineering school, when I got out of engineering school, I had to unlearn most of what I was taught because we're taught things, for example, like imaginary numbers or like square root of -1, or irrational numbers like pi or phi. And we're told, that particularly imaginary numbers or radical numbers that, theoretically they exist, but we can't really do much with them. When in truth those actually describe interdimensional reality outside of 3D physical space-time. And
so I'm like, my mind is going, I really sucked in science and math, and I was like, I said Hail Marys to get through trigonometry. So when you said imaginary number, I'm like, okay, what is that? I don't know what that means.
A square root, 1 times 1 is 1, but the square root of -1 is theoretically impossible because you can't have, when you multiply like -1 times -1, you get +1. So there's this whole set of, quote, imaginary numbers in science and physics that we can't, if you go according to conventional wisdom and training and schooling, you can't do much with them because they don't really exist. But in fact, they do exist in interdimensional physics. And also, this is something that some of these brilliant scientists like Pete Peterson have brought out, and I've also encountered this in other ways, that, we have 10 fingers and toes. There's a whole story behind that I won't get into, but we've got 10 fingers and toes, and so our whole number system is based on base 10. If you change the base to base 3, 6, 9, or 12, particularly base 3, then everything changes in math, and the so-called irrational numbers like pi and phi, then they become rational, and you can do a lot of things with them mathematically and figure out a lot more stuff than we can in our base 10. So there's all this stuff that we've been steered away from, and the separation of consciousness from mathematics and physics and biology and chemistry and science in general is part and parcel of that misdirection.
So you're saying like the answers are over here, but somebody decided that we're only going to look at this little part of the spectrum.
In lots and lots of ways, for techno geeks, Maxwell equations that describe wave functions. There are huge pieces of the Maxwell equations that were pulled out because they described consciousness and interdimensional physics and multiple dimensions of time and space, and so the materialists said, we're living in this physical reality, and none of that other stuff exists. It's all gobbledygook. They pulled it all out.
They want to limit you to this one little.
Exactly. So now scientists are bringing that back in and discovering, wow, we can describe all this interdimensional physics that relates to consciousness because consciousness is multidimensional. And so this is the importance of astrology, is that it relates to the energies not just of the planets and the suns and the cosmos. It also relates to the energy of consciousness, because the energy of consciousness is scalar waves or scalar energy and superluminal light. So all of these systems are affected by consciousness, and they affect consciousness. And so this is why it's important to understand, at least to a certain degree, astrology, even if you don't want to get into all the specifics of how to understand and predict in astrology, it's important to understand that it is important and it's something to be looked at, and we can look to people like you to get more information that we can benefit our lives with.
Yeah, and it's definitely about this. It's really nothing new here. Like you said, it's always, this information has always been there. It's just a matter of, society deciding that we're only going to have this conversation in this little area of the room, but the rest of the room was always there. Mm-hmm. So we're just rejoining what has always been there, at least known to some people, or throughout history. The light never goes out 100%. There's always a crack in the dark, and you have, it's carried forth, like yoga was carried forth.
Even if there was nobody on the planet for a time where some knowledge, was wiped out, let's say, you may have wiped it out of physical space-time here in our place, but you don't wipe it out of all existence, and so it can come back.
Yeah, like it has to.
I mean, it's like we can clear our bodies and our minds. We detox our physical bodies and detox our mind and emotions, and we meditate. You can go back and pull knowledge from it's timeless, from anywhere, and regain knowledge that's been, quote, lost on Earth.
Yeah, that's really That's really cool.
So I want to ask you, what kinds of things, I know because you've advised me on things, but what kinds of things can you do for your clients as far as advising them with astrology? Like, what different kinds of applications does this have as far as what you do goes?
Well, typically when people come to see me, I mean, they may not articulate it like this, but typically there's some kind of crisis. There's some kind of roadblock that they're dealing with. Because let's face it, when things are going well, you're joyriding. Yeah, you don't care. You got your Slim Jims and and all that, or whatever. And so, and so they would say, they need like a reading. I could ask them, okay, is there a certain area that you want to focus on? And in many cases, they just say, no, it's fine. Just whatever you find in there, just let me know. I'm like, okay, and that's typically okay with me. But I can always tell what's going on in there, and and my job is to look at the most. There's a lot. It's like a giant engine. There's a lot of moving parts, but certain parts and certain are more important than others in a chart, and in that time frame that they're asking me. So at the time they come to see me, if they're in a Saturn transit or a Pluto square or whatever it is that will address, and it's my job to delineate and to prioritize. Okay, there's many different things, but honestly, and this is where the intuition comes through, where I had developed that muscle from so many years of sound healing and energy medicine, very much tuned to that. So I have all those strengths, and then I kind of map it, and and I know because there are rules in astrology, but there's also our intuition. And then I'll say, okay, here are the most important things that you really need to focus on. We might not get to this part today, but because it's not as important, but here's what you need to focus on. So I would tell them, here's the situation. Now, again, always emphasizing free will, but saying, look, let's create an empowering interpretation. I had a client recently, and they were saying, well, my whole life I've had problems in the love department. And I said, okay, now listen, you're going. Here's the first thing. Let's rewrite that language. Language is vibration, right? Sound and language. I'm like, all right, let's stop creating that you have problems, and let's call that.
It's a reflection of our thoughts.
Yeah. And I said, okay, the first thing you got to do is, the mastery, your thoughts, your speech. But instead of that, let's call it opportunities, or potential breakthroughs in the love department. Instead of, yes, you've had breakdowns, but let's focus on the solution, and let's put powerful words around this so you're not feeling like a victim, or you're not feeling beaten up. Saturn can really lay a number on, it's the correspondence is lead, according to Yogananda and Sri Yukteswar. So yes, it can feel feel like lead. And what are you going to do with that? Are you going to cave, or are you going to get strong? I like to call Saturn, for example, the drill sergeant of the zodiac. So he's the guy that, you see those movies where, people go to basic training and they're in the barracks and it's 5 a.m. and the light comes on and the guy comes in with the long flashlight. He's like, get up, get up, get up. That's like Saturn, get up and do your work. Get up and be strong and be disciplined, because it's the planet of discipline and responsibility. And when you do and you face it instead of resist it, you're going to get a reward. I typically tell my clients, if they're in a tough Saturn transit, I'll say, okay, you go home, take a big piece of paper, and you write in big letters, Saturn rewards effort. And I said, you got to remember that.
It's like Larry the Cable Guy of planets. You're done.
Larry the Cable Guy. I didn't think of it that way, Ken.
See, now you have another metaphor you could use with people. Well, you see, when you're dealing with people in the South, you go, now you see, Saturn is like Larry the Cable Guy. You got to get her done.
Okay. Whatever it takes, voices. I do voices. I mean, it's what, all right. We really get silly on the podcast, because that's when I can really, I got to, there are people in breakdown. I have to be compassionate with, and I am. And yet, there's always, healing takes many different aspects.
Right. But then also, I refer to you and sometimes other people for event planning, because even though I'm feeling what's going on usually, and I kind of have my intuitions about what's coming down the pike. When I'm planning events or specific travel or things like that, I want to know what the astrological influences are going to be at that time. It may be because I book my schedule out a year in advance. And so, 9 months from now, I'm not really thinking or feeling about what's going on. And I also, a lot of times, I'm distracted with the usual mundane things of 3D life. And so it's extremely helpful for me to have somebody like you go, oh, well, if you're thinking about doing it this time and this date or whatever, it's like, you might be better off doing it this time. That's huge for me. That's well worth paying good money for.
Yeah,
for me.
Yeah. I mean, just it's so practical, and because life is hard enough with all the challenges that we deal with. And again, as my mom used to say, give yourself every advantage. Mm-hmm. You want to have that, and it's a great tool. So why not? And whether it's planning, business-wise. I mean, there's actually a whole branch of astrology called electional astrology, where you can create a chart for an event and to see exactly when, is the most ideal time to do, certain things, depending on what it is, whether it's getting married or, launching a business and various things. So, it's great. I have been so benefited by it, and I have gotten so many healings out of working with astrology that and of course in my world, I'm like, gosh, who wouldn't? Who wouldn't want to know these things? It's no brainer, because it works. I mean, I still got that cynical New Yorker part of me that's like, all right, come on. You have to have a healthy skepticism. You can't just blindly, and so even though I've been, quote, sold on astrology for a long time, you still, you maintain that, and you're real, and yet, you see what you see, and pretty cool.
So let's talk about, we'll finish this up with, we're in like mid-December 2018. Astrologically, what's coming our way in the coming weeks and months?
Well, there's 3 transits I want to talk about. One is, we mentioned a little bit earlier, Uranus and Taurus. It's going back into the sign 0 degrees of Taurus. I want to say it's March 7th. So
March 7th, 2019.
Of 2019.
Just in case somebody's looking at this in 2021.
Right. You missed it. No, you're not, because it's still it's going to be there till 2026. So that's a biggie, because it's all about our financial systems and our personal, Bitcoin, digital currency, all of that it's Uranus rules electronics and AI and the internet. So digital currency, Bitcoin, and all of those alternative currencies are really going to, I can't tell you, yes, Bitcoin's going to go away. It'll either triumph or completely it or go away completely. Which way it goes depends on consciousness. I don't know. But I'm not, here to say yay or nay, go do this, do that. I never, by the way, tell people what to do. I just simply give them the context, and then I say, here, I lay this, here's the picture. Now I'm stepping back, and it's your choice what you want to do. Anyway, yeah, Uranus and Taurus. Very big. The other one is Jupiter, which only takes about a year to go through a sign. And Jupiter entered the sign of Sagittarius, which is its home sign, in November, last month. So that'll be a one-year transit. It just came out of Scorpio, which basically gave us, it was the Scorpio is the shadow self, right? Jupiter turns up the volume. What did we see? Harvey Weinstein, Matt Lauer, the Me Too movement, right? Because Scorpio is sexual, it can rule sexuality and manipulation. The dark side, right, is sexual harassment, the rape culture. Cosby, all of that came up during Jupiter and Scorpio. Now it's in the sign of Sag. Well, Sagittarius rules journalism. It rules the truth. It rules religion, spirituality.
Speaking of journalism, this is something that blows my mind. A lot of these old school mainstream media shills, like John Stossel, what's the guy's name? Bill O'Reilly, people like that. These people are actually have dumped.
Funny, these shills.
They're shills.
All right, Bill O'Reilly, if you're watching this, he doesn't like you.
Well, not now. Not now. No, I love Bill O'Reilly. Now the guy's actually telling some truth.
Because I haven't followed.
Well, me neither. It's like I never looked at that stuff. But 30 years ago, John Stossel was doing reports for ABC saying that nuclear radiation was good for you, and and that organic food was bad for you, and stuff like that was BS, right? Well, now these people have realized they can be bigger on YouTube than they ever were in the mainstream media. So they got their own YouTube channels now, and they're telling the truth.
Wow.
John Stossel has become a libertarian.
Like an advocate for...
like actually telling the truth. I mean, they're not going way out on a limb with, real esoteric stuff, but within the realm of what, information, they're actually telling truth.
They find their true frequency.
Which is, it's amazing to me that these old school mainstream anchor people and reporters,
like who to thunk?
Yeah, they're like dumping the agencies they used to work for, setting up their own YouTube channels and actually telling the truth. And I mean, John Stossel, he proclaims himself a libertarian, and he's actually putting out truth now. And I'm like, this is
that's a breakthrough.
Change.
That's a breakthrough. Well, Jupiter in Sagittarius is again expansion. Jupiter rules wealth, and it's material wealth, spiritual wealth. It rules publishing. It rules the courts and the justice system. And Sagittarius being, journalism. I mean, look what's happened with journalism, and the tragedy with the man in Saudi Arabia, Khashoggi, and all these journalists. The Time magazine just came out on the front page of Time. I mean, okay, maybe it is, mainstream media, but they're addressing it. How can this not? This is the sign of the times. The man, quote, man or person of the year is actually all the imprisoned, the people who've been murdered for being journalists and who are in prison, and that's their person of the year is actually this collective of journalists. So calling attention to this, and when the Me Too movement happened, they had the woman who started Me Too. It was an African American woman, and then all the people around, like the women like Alyssa Milano and Rose Byrne and Rose McGowan, and all of those people that when the Me Too movement really came to fore. And so this year we're going to be seeing more of that, with the press, and Jupiter can be overstretching too, and like zealotry, like going off the deep end, so to speak. And so you might see, instances of religious extremism, and not that we haven't already, but again, that's a theme that would come up. On the quote positive side, I think this is a great year. Jupiter rules higher wisdom and academia, not just journalism, academia, higher wisdom, knowledge, philosophy, occult wisdom, so esoteric wisdom. So perhaps yoga. I think this is going to be a great year for people to become like yoga teachers and move more deeply into this higher ancient bodies of knowledge. So it's pretty awesome. So that's Jupiter. And then, like I was saying earlier, Pluto has been in the sign of Capricorn for 10, now almost 11 years, and it's got several more years to go. But the Saturn moved into the sign of Capricorn about a year ago. It was right at the winter solstice of 2017. Well, Saturn moves a little bit faster, way faster than Pluto, so it's going to catch up to Pluto, and it's going to align like arm in arm, side by side, right in January of 2020. So it's a little over a year from now, but it's going to get pretty darn close in December. So next Christmas is like, whoa, that's fundamental changes in society. Saturn is the planet of restriction and challenge and responsibility and integrity, and like we were saying, the hard-working, the taskmaster, and that is forcing us to get real. It's all about reality and our personal systems of our belief systems of what we think is real. Funny, because you were saying earlier about in the physics of consciousness that all of these other things were outside that spectrum. Well, reality is like, well, what is reality? And where do we define it? Because Saturn rules boundaries. So this is like saying, hey, let's re-examine, especially when Saturn goes retrograde, let's re-examine what our boundaries of what is reality, for one thing, and then boundaries in general, like the boundaries of your personal boundaries and what you allow and where do you give your power away, and is it time to reassess and start a new conversation. Saturn is Capricorn. This is an earth sign. Earth is a feminine element. So you're seeing all the women coming together, the Me Too movement and all of that.
The yellow vests in France. Those protests. France
is a Virgo country, and so you've got Jupiter in Sag. It's squaring. It's squaring, so it's a lot of kick.
How do you think the energies coming are going to affect the surveillance state? Because this is something I see. I got off of social media last March 2018, and I don't regret it one bit. I absolutely dislike social media.
You're now getting your laundry done. No.
Well, for one thing, I'm not one of those people that sits on Facebook and twiddles, because I don't have time to mess with that. But I was on there. Originally, I got on there because marketing people said, "Oh, you should get on Facebook for marketing," and I spent years building up a following on there and stuff. And it was just such a negative experience. I mean, there are lots of wonderful people on Facebook, but there are also a lot of knuckleheads and.
Yeah.
So, I was always encountering a lot of negativity with people. And also, of course, Facebook social engineers what you see in your feed to, to influence you. And particularly if you've got a large following, then they will also, and depending on what you're saying, they will social engineer it so that it hopefully will dissuade you from posting certain things. So it was, I was happy to be off of it, and also, it's a constant barrage of questions. I mean, hundreds every day, which of course I couldn't answer, but I did, at least work my own social media. Whereas most other people I know don't. Most other people hire people to do it, and and then you're never really interacting with the person.
The whole purpose is
so it's like, what's the point of having social media if you've got a team of people managing your social media? It's ridiculous.
It becomes
because it's all about making money. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so anyway, but. I got off social media. I rarely use a cell phone, and actually, the only time I use a cell phone is when I travel, and I primarily use it for GPS, and even that I'm probably not going to be using in the future. And I've done a lot of things to unplug from the surveillance state as much as possible. For example, my cell phone is not in my name, it's in a fake name, and I don't do anything on it with any accounts that are linked to my name. I pay for my phone with cash. Like I buy minutes with cash and then, update my minutes on my phone with cash and stuff. So it's not my phone. Of course, they're doing, fingerprint recognition, voice recognition kind of stuff. So the NSA and people like that have got it. But at least the marketers don't have all of this stuff. So I've been unplugging from the surveillance state as much as possible because I see where it's headed. It's headed globally where China is right now with their surveillance state and their new social credit scoring, where people are being allowed or disallowed access to travel, to privileges, to buying things, all sorts of stuff based on their social score. And right now the media is presenting it like, oh, look at the terrible things that China's doing with all of their surveillance and their social scoring and stuff. It's like, folks, news for you, it's coming our way unless we stop it.
There was the Orville, which is a fantastic, I don't know if you've seen it, it's absolutely
I saw the first
stellar.
episode of it.
Yeah, watch all of them. You can get it on Hulu, Fox, and it is absolutely stellar. Seth MacFarlane and his whole crew, fantastic job. And as a matter of fact, that was one of the episodes a year ago. How prophetic. Who knew? It was actually one of the people on board the Orville ship that, they went to some planet for the day, and this guy, he started acting like Goofy, and then they kind of, it was like the social media police, and people would rank you, and they actually were trying to lock this guy up, and they were going to, put him in prison. It was a scary kind of, it was interesting. It's funny, but it also has some very poignant comments about our society, and I love this show. It's getting such a good following.
Not just based on what you do. Is based on who you associate with as well. So if you have friends who have low social scores, it lowers your social score. There's actually a movie on Netflix about this that, is fiction, supposedly, but it projects out where this will be in years to come. And there's a girl who has the perfect life, and she's got the fancy cars and the fancy house and money and all that kind of stuff because she's a good slave. But her friend that she grew up with, as this system evolved, doesn't have the good social score, and so she doesn't want the girl coming to her wedding because it's all going to be filmed for social media, and it would lower her social score to have her long time. But this is exactly where it could go if we don't stop this mess and stop buying into it.
One of the I love eclipse astrology, and one of the we had 3 eclipses. We had an eclipse sandwich last summer, July, 2 in July and 1 in August, and the one in July, it was a solar eclipse, a lunar, and a solar. And eclipses are the most powerful event in astrology. Just, they show you what needs to shift in your life, in the collective. Well, the lunar eclipse it was at 4 degrees of Aquarius, and Aquarius rules the internet and it rules AI. It's electron, right? And so that, to me, when I felt into that eclipse, energy and the sign, and I saw the chart for the USA, to me it was like a warning, like, hey, you have got to let go. You got to learn the lessons from the past, and we are really at a crossroads with AI, and it's like, how much further do you want to take this? Elon Musk has talked about this. Stephen Hawking, before he died, talked about this, the dangers of getting too far into it. And so, it's pretty disturbing, but I know that eclipse was one of the things that I looked at, and it was pointing to that, we're at this crossroads, and what are we going to do about it? And, speaking of eclipses, if I can just jump over, I didn't mention that, and it is important. We're in the Cancer Capricorn eclipse cycle now. So every year and a half, the eclipses, the nodes, the lunar nodes, the nodes of the moon, they're called lunar nodes, and in Vedic astrology, they're called Rahu and Ketu. They shift into a different zodiac sign. So they've been in Leo, Aquarius. Now they've shifted this past year, starting in the summer of eclipses, started showing up the Cancer eclipse cycle, Cancer and Capricorn. So the north node's in Cancer, the south node's in Capricorn. So what is that bringing up? Well, it's families and and the government. If Cancer rules the home, the mother, women in general, and Capricorn is government and society. Well, here's one place, the very month that went into Cancer in July, that's when we started seeing the stories with the children at the border wall. Because Capricorn rules, Saturn rules walls, boundaries. So here it is, like, build a wall, no, don't build a wall, all that fighting going on. And that's an example of astrology. You see astrology everywhere. Once you know the signs and the archetypes, there it is. You know, government, children and families being separated, and that whole energy playing out. But later this year, like I said, later in 2019, when Saturn gets extremely close, that's massively, that's like really going deep and going in the collective. We have to go deeply within ourselves. And, you know, I don't see it being a really jolly fun time. It's not that kind of energy. But when you are austere in the outside world, what we have to remember, to be an empowering conversation here, it might look, you know, scary or bleak or austere. I'll use the word austere. But on the inside, that's where the fruit of the action is. And so I think about, like, growing up Catholic, you know, we had the nuns, and every Lent was the 40 days before Easter, and we get these cardboard boxes, and we were supposed to give up our candy for Lent, and we had this little coin box with a slot, and you'd put all the money you would have spent on bazooka and all that stuff, you know, Slim Jims, and you'd put the money in there, was the idea, and then you'd have that box full of change, and you'd hand it over to the nuns, and they would give it to the Society for the Propagation of the Faith.
Did nuns eat Slim Jims?
I don't know. I don't think so. Hopefully not. I did not grow up in the South. But anyway, that money was, you know, it was a sacrifice. So the point I'm making is, like, you know, we very well will feel on some level, depending on our state of consciousness, like you were saying earlier, it all depends on your state of consciousness, what you're going to experience. If you're fearful, it's going to look really scary. But if you're powerful with it, we have to remember that when things are constricted in one dimension, they expand in the other.
Right.
So we didn't get that teaching as a kid with the coin box, with the money and the whole thing. Like, we just felt, oh man, I really wanted that candy. But what the nuns failed to tell us was that when you do deny yourself something, you get a benefit. So when we are fasting, for example, we know that we become very tuned in and very sensitive, and we get really higher understandings, subtle understandings of things when we have let go of these grosser levels of food and things. So there's constriction, but expansion of consciousness. So I would say that this, wrapping up this conversation, is the Saturn-Pluto conjunct. Huge opportunity to expand consciousness, but we have to be willing to be uncomfortable and letting go of the distractions of the world and really going within, because there's gold in them. If I'm going to be Southern, there's gold in them thar hills.
That's exactly what I've been feeling. I've really been feeling like, you know, I've got to do less travel, work less, do more inner work, do more physical detoxing, work with Ormus, and expand my consciousness. So that, because, you know, as things become more complex and interesting, I see this a lot. People are confused by the abundance of information out there, especially online, on YouTube, the internet. You know, there's just tons of information, most of it disinformation and nonsense. And a lot of people, because they haven't developed discernment and the inner workings, they can't tell shit from shinola. And they really, so what they do is either say, oh, everything's a conspiracy, or they just shut down and don't believe anything.
They throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Exactly.
Right. You got to learn discernment.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I'm finding that's increasingly important. It's like, I don't care what's out there on the internet or on Gaia.com or whatever. The only thing that really matters to me is what I'm getting in meditation, because that's what's right for me and that's what's pertinent to me. You know, it's like all the other stuff is just head candy. Information doesn't get you what you need. It's what you do spiritually with what you know, and you can get what you know directly from source without plugging into the internet or social media or whatever. Yeah. So 2019, I'm feeling like things are headed in a certain way. What do you see astrologically that 2019 is going to bring economically and politically? Because like you see these protests like the yellow vests in France and other things popping up around the world. I'm feeling like we're going to see more of that, and we're probably going to see it in the United States as well, especially whenever, people have been predicting for decades that the U.S. dollar is going to collapse or that the U.S. economy is going to collapse. Certainly, it can't keep going the way it's going. What do you see astrologically where we're headed in the United States and globally with economics and politically?
Well, that is a very big question. And one thing I feel to, again, reiterate is that, yes, with Pluto in Capricorn, yes, you are seeing the collapse of structures, societal structures as we have known them, the past, the status quo, all of that. It is a collapse. And of course, people get freaked out because we are all wired for comfort, And so naturally, that's just the way it is. But again, that as things fall away, something new is already there that's going to grow. So we just, the words that are coming to me as you're saying this, Ken, is trust the process. Trust. Let that stuff go. I like to use with especially with Pluto and Capricorn. Well, Capricorn rules the teeth. I use the analogy of the bad tooth or the baby tooth. So you get this baby tooth as a kid, and then one day, it serves you well, right? You need it, you eat with it, you chew and everything. And then one day you get this pain because there's this other tooth that's starting to come up, right? Your second tooth. And it hurts. That process of letting go hurts. That baby tooth has served its purpose, and now it's a liability. It's in the way, so it's no longer a good thing to have that. And so it's not an easy process. It's slow. It's kind of messy, especially when your mother yanks that dang thing out, and you got that, it's gross, and you kind of, you just stick your tongue in it. And you're like, gross. But you feel that new tooth underneath, and it's pushing. So nothing is ever released for nothing. There's always something there taking its place. So I would say everyone to focus on what is good there and what it's giving us with this Pluto transit is giving us for society is a new structure of things that is sustainable, that's going to last. Because Capricorn's about legacy. What legacy are you going to leave? And it's reaching deep with calling on our ancestors. Capricorn is ancestral, so calling on our lineage and really connecting deeply. This is a major thing. This has not happened. Pluto has not been in Capricorn in 248 years. It was last in Capricorn, the American Revolution. So we let go of the British system with the taxation and all that. Wasn't working, right? It worked for a while and it just didn't. And there was something better. And so now we're moving. We've gone as far as we can. It's not sustainable any longer. Pluto also rules the oligarchy, and so there to have all these people at the top, the few billionaires that are owning most of the wealth, that's not a sustainable model. So it's okay to trust and know, like you were saying earlier, doing your inner work. Absolutely, this is a year to really go deep and connect with your intuition and your guidance and elevate yourself, because be part of the solution and focus on that. Don't focus on the tooth that's hanging and straggling and don't hang on. Like you could imagine if you were saying, I don't like this, I'm going to take a Band-Aid and I'm going to tape it down and I'm going to stick andesol on it because then I don't have to feel the pain. Well, how ridiculous. So you'll see people in society, we're kind of taking this fork in the road. The ones who are hanging on in fear, and then the ones that are like, okay, we don't like this either, but we're just gonna be in faith and trust. And I would say to have compassion too, because Cancer, the North Node in Cancer is all about mothering and compassion. So have compassion for those people who are in that fearful way. There are so many people that are afraid. You know, you see these racist people making these horrible racist comments in the media and you know, whatever, all that behavior is like, you know, you have to have compassion, because that is what's going to melt things and really shift. If you hate on them, you're just going to continue this cat and mouse. Exactly. You've got to get beyond that, and if you envelop them, I'm not saying you're agreeing with them, but if you envelop it with compassion and you see it as part of a larger change taking place, then you will have a transformed society, and that's what we all want.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. I've never been apprehensive about the future, and in fact, even now, the other day I got a phone call from somebody who's got $11 billion in the wings and wants to develop all these amazing technologies and solutions for humanity to benefit them, and they said they're just waiting in the wings until things change a little bit to where they can come out with certain things. And so they were having discussions with me about some of my technologies. And so the future for people, I think, who are looking to the new paradigm and looking to the future and looking to shift and change and shifting and changing, they're going to be just fine. It's the folks that are, like you said, trying to hang on to the old paradigm with their hand, just, you know, with every clutch, that are the ones suffering, and always have. But especially now with the rapid rate of change, you know, people have got to look forward and look into the new paradigm and work with new paradigm instead of resisting it.
Right. And I, you know, this sounds a little harsh, but it's something that Eckhart Tolle says in his book, A New Earth, which is absolutely fabulous. It's probably a great time to read it, A New Earth. It was the one that was on Oprah now it's 10 years ago. She interviewed him for an entire week, and he is such a master. And I know he has said, and this was 10 years ago, that we have come to this place where, you know, we're at a crossroads, and we certainly feel it now. But I remember him saying, like, it's crucial. It's not like oh, wouldn't it be nice to evolve? Now it's like, you got to evolve. And he wrote, and he's not one for harsh talk. He's probably one of the most gentlest souls on the planet. But I remember him writing, and it was in italics, and he said, evolve or die.
Right.
And that's it.
Exactly what's happening.
What else is there to do?
That's exactly what's happening. People are dropping like flies, man, just from disease and stuff, from not wanting to change. I mean, when I was on social media, my high school alumni association found me and reconnected with me, and now they send me emails on updates with what's going on with my classmates from high school, and it's amazing, man. I'm like, I'll be 58 in a couple of months, and even, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, when I was getting these emails, it's like every week my classmates are dropping like flies, have been dropping like flies for years and years. And it's because
at the age of 58.
Yeah, in their 50s.
Good.
Because they're trying to live the same way they did back in high school, eating the same crap, doing the same things, you know, using the same toxic products, living the same toxic lifestyles. And it's like they're just hanging on to that old paradigm and don't want to change, and that's exactly it. You will die and suffer immensely along the way if you do not shift and change with the new paradigm and the energies coming on the planet. You know?
And that will be very much, that conversation will really be prevalent and present for people at the end of next year, when Saturn and Pluto get closer and closer. It'll get more and more apparent. And like, you know, if in case you're not paying, by then you will be paying attention. But really, it's, and yeah, I think there will be a lot of people that are going to leave the planet. And I don't mean that, and I'm not being mean, or I'm just, you know, simply, there is no judgment to that. You know, there are people who did not, who are just ready. They're ready to leave, and it's okay. There's no failure in death. It's just, it's their time or whatever, or they've chosen, like, okay, you know, maybe they we're supposed to be there longer, but if they're confronted, they're confronted. And so we stay open in our heart, we're compassionate, and then we just let the chips fall where they may, and allow it to be however it has to be. And but the compassion element is crucial, and I see that has been missing in the news media. I haven't seen a lot. It's sad how people, it seems like that volume is turned up, but I think it's also part of the process, because another great thing that I loved in A New Earth, the Eckhart Tolle book, he says something like, he said, and I thought of Trump, when he said this. He said, as the ego is expressed, it burns itself off. I thought, oh wow, that's cool. So in a way, it's like go ego, just get that. It's like popping a zit. Just get that stuff out of here. Because it's just dissipating. So. Yeah, it's very uncomfortable to be in that, but eventually it's all for the good. So instead of getting caught up and reactive to this and that, oh, he said this and you said that, you said about spending so much time on Facebook. It's like I saw, like, we all have a choice. You want to keep on reacting and getting mad and upset? Oh, do you really want to put your energy in that, or do you want to write poetry and that art that you're wanting to do your whole life? It's your choice. So it made it very loud and clear for us, like, wow, do we really want to go there? And where are we putting our energy? Are we in our power? Saturn in Capricorn's like, where are you in your power? Where are you not in your power? Because it's going to, aligning with Pluto, it's going to transform your life. And it's right in our face. It's not an easy transit. But I think if we give ourselves and invent powerful contexts for these challenges, that'll give us a huge leg up, that we're not victims. We can create the reality that we want, and it's not being fluffy. I'm being real here.
Well, any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
Yeah, going into that serious 2019 showdown, the podcast, listen to the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
It's humorous. You learn, and
your
it's
website, again, is starsoundastrology.com. The podcast is Starsound Speaks, which you can access either through iTunes or your website.
Right, or it's also on Google Podcasts, it's on Spotify, it's on Pocket Casts and Radio Public and all these really cool platforms, or the website. Yeah, I can.
And you do astrological readings and consultations, that kind of stuff. So if people want to get in touch with you, they can get in touch with you through your website. Yep.
Shoot me an email, and yeah, it's great. I love this work. I love assisting people and finding their magic, and creating that outrageous life. It's like, what does Oprah say? Live your best life.
Exactly.
Let's do it.
Exactly. And I can tell you personally, I'll give you a testimonial. Irlianna has advised me quite a few times, and it's always been extremely beneficial. And so, so a little plug there. Check her out.
Glad it helped.
Yes, and we'll link on YouTube. We'll link to Irlianna's website below the video as well.
Yay!
Okay. And we'll post this on my blog too, so we'll link to it there as well.
Cool. Thank you so much.
All right, my pleasure.
I'm very grateful for the opportunity.
Yeah. And we'll have a further discussion about the planet that starts with a U that some people pronounce a certain way.
That's the only, thank goodness it's only one planet that has that. I don't think any other, don't go there, no.
Let's see, what other planets?
Cut.
I can think of a few. But anyway, we'll save that for another video. Which, by the way, speaking of another video, we'll get you back to maybe periodically to give us some updates on what's going on in the coming year, so we can kind of have an idea of what's headed our way.
Yeah, like when Jupiter retrogrades. This is a very, by the way, it's a very lucky window this last 2 weeks of December. Yeah, July. Where am I going? And a very abundant window. And then in the beginning, in the month of January, I don't believe there's any planets retrograde. We had a lot of retrograde. It felt like nothing was moving forward in 2018. Yes, but not really. Well, now there's this little window, and it's rare, where all these planets are direct. So it's like the horse out of that starting gate. So use January powerfully. Use right now, regardless of astrology. Always be in the moment, and check those weather charts, man. They're in our favor, and create what that outrageous life that you desire. Go for it. Like, put that joy in your heart, because that's vibratory frequency, and we need it on the planet.
I'm going to San Diego in January to a real estate conference, so that'll be
real
great.
Estate rules, Capricorn rules real estate.
All right.
You are working those nodes.
All righty.
Yeah.
There you go. All right. Well, thanks very much, and we'll catch you another time. And until then, thanks for watching, and we'll see you later.
Thank you.